The Unraveling. Olivia Walker stood before the full-length mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the emerald green gown that draped across her swollen belly. She was 7 months pregnant, and tonight Blake wanted her to look perfect for the annual charity gala at their mansion. The irony was not lost on her that she needed to be perfect while her husband was anything but. She had always been the kind of wife who believed in standing by her man through thick and thin. She had supported Blake when he was nobody, when he struggled to build his real estate empire, when he worked 18-hour days and barely came home. She cheered for him, attended every business dinner, smiled beside him as his net worth climbed into the billions. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Blake Walker had become someone she no longer recognized. The man who once brought her flowers every Friday now barely looked at her. The man who whispered promises of forever now spent his nights at the office, or so he claimed. She knew the truth, though. She had always known. There was a woman named Vanessa Brooks, a sleek and calculating woman with ice-blue eyes and ambitions as sharp as daggers. Vanessa had entered their lives about a year ago as Blake's executive assistant and had never left. Olivia touched her reflection gently, running her fingers over the dark circles under her eyes. She looked tired. She looked sad. She looked like a woman whose marriage was crumbling beneath her feet even as she tried desperately to hold it together. Downstairs, the caterers were already setting up tables, the florists arranging cascading white roses and orchids, the bar staff polishing crystal glasses. The mansion sparkled under the glow of 1,000 tiny lights. Olivia had made sure every detail was flawless, just as she always did. She wanted tonight to be perfect. She wanted Blake to look at her the way he used to. She wanted to remind him of what they had built together, what they meant to each other. Blake appeared in the doorway of their bedroom as she applied her lipstick. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his strong jaw freshly shaved. He smiled at her, but it did not reach his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice distant and automatic. "Thank you," she replied, wondering if he noticed the way her voice cracked slightly. "The guests will be arriving soon," he said, checking his watch. "I need to go greet them." "Of course," she said, watching as he turned to leave without even kissing her forehead as he used to do. She stood alone in their bedroom and placed her hand on her belly, feeling the flutter of their child moving inside her. A baby, a child that would bind them together forever, or so she had once believed. Now she wondered if bringing a baby into this broken marriage was a mistake. She wondered if her child would grow up in a home filled with resentment and infidelity. She wondered how she had gotten to this point. An hour later, Olivia descended the grand staircase of their mansion, surveying the crowd of wealthy guests who mingled and laughed below. She spotted Blake immediately. He was standing near the fireplace in conversation with several business associates. But her eyes were drawn to the woman beside him. Vanessa Brooks wore a stunning black dress that seemed painted onto her skin. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves down her back, and she gazed at Blake with possession and hunger written all over her face. Olivia felt her heart tighten. She had invited Vanessa to the party herself because Blake had insisted it would look strange if his executive assistant was not there. His words exactly, "It would look strange." But nothing looked strange about the way Vanessa touched his arm, the way she leaned close to whisper something in his ear, the way Blake smiled at her. Olivia forced herself to look away and move through the party, playing the role of the gracious hostess as she always did. She accepted congratulations about the baby, she smiled at jokes, she pretended not to notice her husband's obvious attraction to his mistress. By midnight, she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and she excused herself to find a quiet place to rest. She wandered down the hallway toward the library, seeking refuge in solitude. But as she approached the doorway, a voice stopped her cold.
The confrontation. Vanessa Brooks stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, her black dress seeming to absorb the dim light. Her expression was predatory and cruel as she blocked Olivia's path. "I have been waiting for a moment alone with you," the mistress said, her voice dripping with venom. Olivia felt her stomach tighten, not just from anxiety, but from the strain of carrying her child. She tried to sidestep Vanessa, but the woman moved with her. "Excuse me," Olivia said, attempting to keep her voice steady. "I am tired and need to rest." "Rest," the mistress laughed bitterly. "Do you think rest will save your marriage? Do you honestly believe that carrying Blake's child will make him love you the way he loves me?" Olivia felt her heart shatter at those words, even though she had suspected this truth for months. Vanessa continued, her voice rising with each word. "Blake told me everything about you, how disappointed he is, how you have become boring, how you trapped him with this pregnancy. He is mine now, Olivia, and there is nothing you can do about it. He has already arranged for us to leave together next month, just the two of us." Olivia reached deep within herself for strength, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. "You are delusional," she said quietly but with conviction. "Blake would never abandon his child, and deep down you know that, which is why you are so desperate to turn him against me." Vanessa's face contorted with rage, and she stepped closer, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the air between them. "You think you know him, but you know nothing," Vanessa hissed. "He showed me everything, the prenup, the offshore accounts, the exit strategy he has already planned. He has been waiting for the perfect moment to leave you, and now that you are pregnant and vulnerable, he finally sees his escape route. I am the one he wants. I am the one he will choose." Something inside Olivia broke and reformed stronger. She realized in that moment that she had been living in denial for far too long. She had been clinging to a marriage that was already dead. She had been trying to save a man who had already chosen to destroy her. But she would not let this woman see her crumble. Not now, not ever. "You can have him," Olivia said, her voice cold and clear as ice. "If Blake is foolish enough to throw away his family for you, then he deserves the misery that comes with it." She turned to walk away, but Vanessa grabbed her arm violently, spinning her back around. "You do not get to leave," Vanessa snarled. "You do not get to have the last word. You are nothing but a nuisance, an obstacle between Blake and his true happiness. I should have eliminated you long ago." Before Olivia could even process what was happening, Vanessa shoved her backward with all her strength. Olivia felt her body lose control, her feet tangling beneath her as gravity took hold. She fell backward toward the stairs, her hands reaching desperately for something to grab onto, but finding only air. Her scream echoed through the mansion as her body tumbled down the flight of marble steps, each impact sending waves of pain through her pregnant form. She heard the sound of her own bones cracking, felt the warmth of blood beginning to flow. Her last conscious thought before darkness claimed her was a prayer for her unborn child, that somehow, against all odds, the baby would survive what she could not.
The choice. Blake was laughing at something one of his business partners had said when he heard the scream. His body went rigid, recognizing his wife's voice cutting through the noise of the party like a knife. He pushed through the crowd toward the sound of commotion, but before he could reach the bottom of the stairs, Vanessa was there beside him, her face a mask of concern and fake distress. "Blake!" she cried out, clutching his arm. "Oh my God, I think Olivia fell. I tried to catch her, but she was moving so quickly I could not reach her in time. She must have tripped in those heels she was wearing. She was always so clumsy, especially now being pregnant." Blake stared at the crumpled form of his wife at the bottom of the staircase, her emerald dress now stained with blood. Her body lay motionless and broken. The guests had begun to gather, gasping in horror. Someone was already calling for an ambulance. For a moment, Blake stood frozen, torn between two worlds, the world where his wife and unborn child needed him, and the world where Vanessa gripped his arm, pulling him back toward her, toward comfort, toward lies. Blake looked at Vanessa, who gazed up at him with those ice-blue eyes, and he saw the truth written all over her face. He saw what she had done. But in that critical moment, he made a choice. He squeezed Vanessa's hand, pulled her closer, and whispered to her, "It is okay. No one will believe her, even if she remembers what really happened." As the ambulance arrived and paramedics rushed to Olivia's side, Blake remained distant, cool and detached. He gave a statement to police expressing his shock and sadness about his wife's terrible accident. He stood beside Vanessa as photographers snapped pictures. He held her hand as they watched Olivia being carried away on a stretcher. His empire, His reputation, his desire to keep Vanessa at his side, had become more important than the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. The mother of his child, the woman who had loved him unconditionally, had become an obstacle to be managed, rather than a person to be saved. In the hospital, Olivia lay broken and barely conscious. Her injuries were severe. Her ribs were cracked, her right leg was broken in 2 places. Her face was bruised beyond recognition. But the deepest wound was knowing that Blake had chosen to stand with her attacker rather than come to her aid. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, she made a silent vow that whatever happened next, she would survive this, she would fight back, and she would make sure that Blake and Vanessa paid for what they had done to her and to their unborn child.
Survival and revelation. 3 weeks passed before Olivia regained full consciousness. The first face she saw when her eyes finally opened was not her husband's. It was her mother, Margaret, who had rushed from Boston the moment she heard about the accident. Margaret held her daughter's hand, carefully avoiding the IV lines and monitors that kept Olivia tethered to this fragile existence. "My baby," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you are awake. The doctor said you might not make it." "Where is Blake?" Olivia asked, her voice hoarse and barely audible. Margaret exchanged a knowing look with the nurse before turning back to her daughter. "Blake has been here, but only briefly. He seems more concerned with managing the media than with your recovery, Olivia. I need to tell you something. The detective investigating your fall has some concerns. He has been trying to speak with you." Over the following days, as Olivia slowly regained her strength, Detective Raymond Mitchell visited her hospital room. Detective Mitchell was a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He sat beside her bed and carefully explained what he had discovered. Security footage from the hallway showed everything: the push, the fall, the calculated cruelty of Vanessa Brooks. He also explained that several staff members at the mansion had come forward with accounts of Vanessa's jealousy and violent outbursts. They painted a picture of a woman obsessed with Blake, willing to do anything to have him. "I have enough to arrest Vanessa Brooks," the detective said, "but I need your statement. I need to hear from you what happened that night, Olivia." Olivia told him everything. Her voice trembled as she recounted Vanessa's words, her threats, her rage. She described the push, described falling, described the terror of losing control of her own body. And she described something else. She described the look in Blake's eyes when he chose his mistress over her, when he looked at his dying wife and turned away. The detective leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Blake Walker has some explaining to do as well," he said. "But before we can move forward with charges against him, we need to determine his level of culpability. He may have been complicit in covering up the crime, or he may simply be a foolish man trying to protect his reputation. Either way, justice will be served." As the detective left, Olivia lay back against her pillows and felt something shift inside her. It was not hope exactly. It was something harder, something stronger. It was the burning desire to fight back, to reclaim her life, to protect her child. The baby had miraculously survived the fall. The doctors called it a miracle, but Olivia knew it was more than that. It was a sign that she and her child were meant to survive, meant to thrive, meant to see Blake and Vanessa face the consequences of their actions. Days later, Blake's lawyer arrived at the hospital, offering her a settlement, a generous one. He wanted her to sign documents agreeing not to press charges, not to speak to the media, not to destroy his reputation and his empire. In exchange, she would receive $50 million and full custody of the child when it was born. Blake had even included a clause guaranteeing that she would never see him again. Olivia stared at the paper spread before her on the hospital bed tray, and for a moment she was tempted. She could take the money, disappear, start over, build a new life for her and her baby. But then she thought about all the other women Blake might hurt, all the other families that might be destroyed by his cruelty and Vanessa's violence. She thought about justice and accountability, and the kind of example she wanted to set for her child. She picked up her pen
and signed the documents, but not her signature. On the signature line she wrote, "I refuse," and handed the papers back to Blake's lawyer. "Tell my husband that I am going to destroy him," she said, her voice steady and certain. "And tell him that there is nothing he can do to stop me."
The Reckoning. 6 months later, Olivia sat in the courtroom of Superior Court Judge Patricia Richardson, held her hand protectively over her belly. She was 8 months pregnant now, and despite the trauma her body had endured, the baby continued to thrive. The trial of Vanessa Brooks for attempted murder had captured the attention of the entire city. Media outlets ran daily updates, celebrities weighed in on social media, and the case became a symbol of wealth, privilege, and the way powerful men protected powerful women from the consequences of their crimes. The prosecution presented its case methodically. The security footage was damning. The testimony of household staff was compelling. The medical evidence was irrefutable. Vanessa Brooks had attempted to murder a pregnant woman out of jealousy and spite. Blake Walker, sitting in the gallery beside his mistress, watched as his perfect world began to crumble. But Olivia had done something that no one expected. She had recorded conversations with Blake in the weeks after her attack. She had documented his attempts to convince her that she had misremembered what happened, that Vanessa had not meant to hurt her, that she should let the matter go. She had evidence of his affair, communications between him and Vanessa that proved his complicity in the cover-up. She had hired the best lawyers money could buy, and she was not going to let Blake escape justice simply because he wore an expensive suit and carried a bigger bank account. The jury deliberated for only 2 days. They returned with a verdict of guilty. The judge sentenced Vanessa Brooks to 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. The spectators cheered. Olivia's mother embraced her daughter as tears of relief streamed down both their faces. But the case against Blake was more complicated. The prosecutor presented evidence of his cover-up, his attempts to silence Olivia, his protection of Vanessa. But Blake had not physically pushed Olivia down the stairs. Blake had not technically broken any laws in his affair or his attempts to reconcile with his mistress. What he had done was morally reprehensible, but legally ambiguous. Still, the jury found him guilty of being an accessory after the fact and of conspiracy to cover up a crime. They recommended maximum sentencing, and the judge obliged. Blake Walker would spend 5 years in prison. He would lose his business empire as the civil suits piled up. He would lose his reputation, his freedom, and everything he had thought was worth more than his wife and unborn child. As Blake was led away in handcuffs, he finally looked directly at Olivia for the first time since the night of the fall. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she saw something break inside him. He saw the enormity of what he had lost, what he had chosen to lose. The shock and disbelief on his face told her that he had genuinely believed he would escape consequences, that his wealth and status would shield him from accountability. Olivia turned away. She did not need to watch his suffering. She had already received what she needed, justice for herself and for her unborn child. 2 months later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Emma. The first time she held her daughter, Olivia made a promise that Emma would grow up knowing her worth, knowing that she deserved to be protected and cherished, and never abandoned by someone who claimed to love her. Olivia rebuilt her life with the strength that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. She used part of her settlement to start a foundation for women who had been abused by powerful men. She became an advocate for victims' rights and domestic violence awareness. She showed the world that even the most devastating betrayals do not have to define your future. And as for Blake and Vanessa, they faded into history, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale about greed, ambition, and the corrosive power of infidelity. Their names became synonymous with betrayal, and their faces served as reminders that no amount of wealth could protect you from the consequences of your cruelty. In the end, Olivia Walker won, not because she was wealthy or powerful, but because she chose to fight back, because she refused to be silenced, and because she believed in the possibility of justice. Even when the world seemed stacked against her, she found the strength to survive
and to thrive.